Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Speaking of referendums, Britain's Brexit negotiating stance is to have cake and eat it, according to handwritten notes mistakenly shown. I can't buy into the notion that it was non-mistakenly. Can you? That they actually wanted this hodgepodge of speculation to be poured over by the country, not at this stage in proceedings, mistakenly shown after a meeting between Tory MPs and senior figures in Whitehall yesterday. So it is a woman called Julia Dockerell, who is Chief of Staff to Mark Field, the Conservative MP for the cities of London and Westminster, who became the latest to fall foul of the cameras outside Downing Street. She walked from number 9 Downing Street, which is the department's headquarters, into number 10, but still managed to forget that the nation's cameras would not only be waiting, but would also be clicking. And I know these boys, they have long lenses that are there specific. They're not trying to get a picture of her. Someone will just be chancing his arm on this. Quite a lot of photography in the context of newspaper photographers is luck and judgment. It is just being in the right place at the right time and hoping for stuff, you know, like those little moments that you can't predict but you know might happen. So they just get the long lens on the camera, focus in on the notebook, click away. They don't know what it's not like they can read it as they walk past. When they develop the picture, James, it's 2016, mate. When they click on the picture on their card, their memory card, they might say, "Oh, I must remember to buy some bolognese sauce on the way home tonight," or it could just be a doodle. I don't know about you. I went through a phase of I would always be doodling guns on the side of my notes. I don't know why. It goes back to my school days, doing little guns on the side of my notes. And it could have just been that. They don't know until they click on the image. And they click on the image and it appears to be comprehensive notes of a top secret meeting unfolding yards away and addressing the issue that is the most mysterious in the land at the moment. Have cake and eat it. That's how my 8-year-old negotiates. You start off with bedtime. She'll start off at midnight. So what time are you going to go to bed tonight? Midnight. That's well, actually, I was thinking more like 7 o'clock. And she's worked out, even at the age of 8, that if she started off at 8 o'clock, her negotiating position is weaker than it would be if she started off at midnight. What time are you going to bed tonight? Midnight. Well, I was thinking 7. All right, 11:30. And she's working on the principle that I will not just keep saying, no, I'm still saying 7, darling. We're still looking at, all right, half 10, 9:15, 9 o'clock. So she's got to have cake and eat it negotiating position, in the sense that you go out there asking for the moon, and then hopefully you might come away with something vaguely similar to the amount of the earth that you had already. 0345 6060 is the number to call. And I want to do it today we do this occasionally, as you'll be aware that I'm very much in the school of thought that doesn't really understand what the hell the country's doing at the moment. I haven't managed to find that Kool-Aid that allows us to be supremely optimistic about the future. I rely instead on all the institutions and information providers that have been relied upon historically for guidance on such matters. They're never infallible. They will make mistakes. The predictions of economic doom and gloom that I think were contingent upon David Cameron keeping his promise to trigger Article 50 immediately after the referendum result. So, you know, the fact that the cliff edge is looming closer but we haven't gone over it yet is because he didn't keep that promise. I think there's consensus on that, but crikey, consensus is difficult. And then the question of consensus raises its ugly head once again when I remind you of what we tried to do the morning after the result came in. Can we find anything that we can all agree on, whatever our position may currently be? Can we find anything that we can all agree on? And we did on the morning after the referendum, and I think it still holds true. The only thing upon which we can all agree is nobody knows what happens next. Nobody knows what the future is going to look like. Everyone's got ideas, everyone's got fears, everyone's got opinions, everyone's got views. But when you see someone coming out of the government's negotiating meeting with a piece of paper containing the phrase, have cake and eat it, you're left with two conclusions. Either my 8-year-old has been involved in negotiations and they're going all in for midnight bedtime to start with. Yeah, it's a logic to that, of course there is. Ask for the moon. You know you're not going to get it, but you get more than you would have done if you'd started off asking for what you ended up with. Or they really are just making it up as they go along. There really is really no plan in any meaningful sense. And no one's going to agree on that. If I say to you, can we all agree that there is no plan? Because you have to believe there is a plan if you voted for it. But what do you think the plan is? See, Norway got cited a lot during the referendum campaign by people who just completely overlooked the fact that Norway has complete freedom of movement of people as part of its European Union deal. It was deal with the European Union. So, as I understand it, a massive part of the Leave vote was motivated by a rejection of freedom of movement of people, and yet all of the people who were on that side of the vote often cited Norway as an example. So that would have to be the reason why Norway apparently is not going to provide us with a model. Canada Plus is the phrase that appears also on this crib sheet. Canada Plus. Canada very nearly fell at the final hurdle with its trade deal with the European Union due to the Parliament, if memory serves, of Wallonia, a sort of curious province of Belgium. Wallonia nearly put the kibosh on Canada's trade deal with the European Union. Canada Plus, presumably, would be the kind of trade deal that the Parliament of Wallonia couldn't put the kibosh on. Canada Plus. I think, and I absolutely reserve the right to reverse this position, because like everybody else, I'm sort of groping around in the dark. I think at the moment it is more likely to be throwing their hands up in the air after the negotiations have been underway, triggering Article 50 and walking away without knowing what the hell the future is going to hold. I think the rabid voices of the far right are now so hard to ignore in this country that there's not going to be any attempt to impose logic or consistency on the negotiations. It will be simply, if we don't come out now, we will face all sorts of political and social problems, because the unchecked anger, the unfocused fury is focused now. People can't answer simple questions about what they want. Everybody knows what they don't want. Like, we want out. Well, what does that mean? Don't care, just want out. Brexit means Brexit. Let's go. And that's fine. I'm not having any arguments with you today. 0345 6060973 is the number to call. No arguments today about that kind of thing, because Brexit means you just want out. You don't care what it looks like. I don't know whether 52% of the people who cast their vote in June would agree with that. I don't care what it looks like. I just want out. But enough of them would for the debate really to have moved out of the realms of discussion and into the realms of demands. So, do you think we have a plan? 0345 6060973. If you voted to leave and you don't think we've got a plan, I noticed from my box of trolls you're already getting cross with me today for asking these questions. It's not my fault. How can it possibly be my fault that the people you voted for don't have a plan? And the people who've ended up having to carry the can don't have a plan either? It's not my fault. It can't be the Remain side's vote or fault that there's no plan. It's almost as if you're saying to people who were against leaving the European Union, well, why the hell haven't you got a plan on how we're going to do what you don't want to do but we do? It's disgusting that you haven't got a plan on how you're going to do what you don't want to do but we do want to do. You should have a plan on how to do it. You wonder sometimes whether you're veering into the realms of surrealism here. Whose job was it to have a really clear idea on what an exit would look like? The people who wanted to stay or the people who wanted to exit? Yeah, exactly. So now the people who wanted to stay are charged with trying to make some sense of the plan to leave, a plan they never wanted to be following in the first place. Theresa May, Philip Hammond, reluctant Remainers, people who got completely overlooked during the referendum campaign. 0345 6060973 is the number to call. Some people are already sick of Brexit discussions. Almost all of them Leave voters. And to be honest with you, if I'd voted to leave the European Union, I'd be sick of these discussions as well, because every single one of them is making me feel stupid. Oh no, he's talking about Brexit again. Oh, why doesn't he just shut up? What's he doing asking whether or not there's a plan? Oh no, what a Ramona. Wanting a plan, wanting to know what's going to happen to the country that he loves. What sort of a monster is he? What sort of a thicko is he, actually wanting to know what sort of freedoms his children might enjoy educationally and geographically when they're older? God, get over it, you Remainiac. You lost. Move on. Why on earth would you want to know what your own country's going to look like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? Why would you want to know how much your house might be worth or how much your wages might buy? Why are you asking these ridiculous questions about whether or not you'll be able to afford your weekly shop by next Christmas? I don't know why. I'm weird that way. I'm sort of addicted to detail. So what do you think the detail is? Because I'm not going to lie to you, I never do. I don't think they've got a Scooby-Doo, what they're doing. Do you know what I think Theresa May is doing now? And this isn't even intended as a criticism, because I don't know what the alternative would be. I think Theresa May is just balancing. Theresa May is just trying to keep things together. Literally trying to work out what is going to be the least unpopular, rather than the most popular position. The least unpopular. What can we do? I don't want to live in a divided country anymore. I'm happy for everyone to start pulling together towards a common goal. But you need to know what that common goal is. You're not going to be able to enjoy free movement of capital and free movement of product across borders in the European Union without free movement of people. You're just not. People on both sides get that. That's why a lot of people who during the referendum campaign claimed we could stay in the single market are now claiming they said all along that we couldn't. Because that con has been sold. That ship has sailed. You're not going to get it. So, I don't know what we do. What plan would you have? Let's do that. I'm going to put you in charge. Okay? I'm going to put you in charge. What would you be negotiating? What would you be trying to get? 0345 60 973 is the number to call. And I tell you what I would like. People who wanted to remain, who want to stop talking about it now as well. Because I'm getting a lot of people who voted leave who don't want to talk about it anymore. And I don't have sympathy for you, but I have full understanding of your position. It is your fingers squarely in your ears. And you're going, la 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 la, shut up, stop pointing out, da 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 la 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 la. Well, that's fine, I get that. But I can presume that some people who wanted to stay sick to death of it as well now. It's a little bit like fearing that you're heading towards a cliff edge, but actually, do you know what? For a while now, I'd like to pretend that I'm not. Can we not just pretend we're at the safari park? That's why we're all on this bus. 10:17 is the time. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. Do you think we've got a plan? And if we do, is it possibly rather more sophisticated than have cake and eat it? 0345 6060 973. We also learn from this accidentally photographed note that the EU negotiating team is very French. I'll get that out there now. You might want to start taking notes. But be careful who sees them. Ben's in Maidstone. Ben, what would you like to say?
I think you're precisely right. I don't think we have a plan at all. To be honest with you, I think it comes from the fact that we're kind of expecting politicians to be experts on Europe when, as we know, politicians aren't really experts on anything at all. And I don't mean that. I mean that in the nicest possible way. You know, for example, Jeremy Hunt doesn't know how to perform a surgical procedure. The sports minister can't play any kind of sports.
That's true always of everything, isn't it? It's not really how parliamentary democracy works. There would have been Whitehall officials at this meeting whose job is to conduct negotiation and who are theoretically the ones who are qualified to do these things. And they were at the meeting and they still, or this woman still came out with these things jotted down on her pad.
Yes, and that's what the most worrying part is, that we are completely disregarding the experts in this whole process. You know, there's the famous quote, and you're going to have to excuse me, I can't remember who actually said it, but he said people have had enough of it.
Michael Gove.
Now, it's slightly taken out of context from what he was originally saying, but that seems to be
He wasn't, you know. Sorry to be so boring, but he was asked if he could name any economists who supported his vision of the future, and at that point he said, I think this country has had enough of experts.
Well, I mean, there's your answer there. If we, you know, I mean, we all know how complex, you know, it's far more complex than the press is making out to actually be, to begin with. You know, the reams and reams and reams of legislation that all has to be undone. And then we're going to do this without, by the sounds of it, seeking any expert help. And the complication of all of this has completely been spun by the right-wing press, as you said, to a simple Brexit means Brexit. Now, I'm in the same camp as you. I think we are literally just going to storm out of it, and we're going to have to reap very little benefits from that, and we're going to be paying for this mistake for years and years to come.
Not getting much upbeat, optimistic analysis from you then, Ben. What's the best case scenario?
Well, the thing, I run a small business, so I'm self-employed. I employ 2 or 3 people on a freelance basis. And it's terrifying for me because my biggest clients are multinationals, which means they are going to be ploughing money elsewhere and not into this country.
Why do you say that? How do you know that that's true? Why wouldn't they continue to plough money into this country?
Because we're a consumerist nation. Now, as soon as the economy goes to pot...
It might not. Why are you presuming that it will?
Why am I presuming that it'll go to pot or we'll stop buying things?
But there's chicken and egg, isn't it? The economy goes to pot, we stop buying things.
Okay, so for example, look at the housing market. The high-end housing market has just said that they are not selling high-end houses. Now, to me, that's a massive warning sign, because as soon as people who have lots of money, and that means lots of money that to them, this is a small investment, as soon as they stop buying, that's a sign that the economy is starting to slow. Now, if people aren't willing to invest, you get this kind of everyone holds back, and they keep holding back, and they keep holding back. And in the end, everyone is too scared to do anything at all. And that's when it all starts to fall down. You start to see the kind of...
you're more pessimistic than me, and you're probably because you're more qualified than I am, or more expert than I am. But I kind of, the one thing that people predicted would happen that was supposed to scare us, that I would have thought, although it would harm me personally, I thought it would be good for the country, would be if there was some sort of thinning out of the housing market, if there was some sort of lowering of overall prices, and that process would have to start at the top. You've just reminded me of a new variation on a very old joke, Ben, when you mentioned that you run a small business. Do you know the best way to get a small business in Britain today?
Enlighten me.
Start with a big business and vote Brexit.
Oh, yeah.
26 after 10. Dan's in Leicester. Dan, what would you like to say?
Hello. Just for the fun of it, I'm going to go the exact opposite way and suggest that...
Well, no, don't. Listen, this is not... I'm not being sort of snipey or any... but we don't do that on here. I only take calls from people who are speaking truth and saying things that they mean.
Okay.
So not just for the fun of it.
No, I'm actually deadly serious. I don't think anybody walks out of Downing Street with their trousers down.
So she was tempting the photographers.
I think the leak, the leak in inverted commas has always been for a long time a legitimate way of disseminating information, hasn't it?
Yes, of course it has. It's usually done a little more, what would the word be? I don't know, a slightly more sophisticated fashion than this film.
Well, yeah, I think the less sophisticated it appears, the better. I mean, you look at, so it's Theresa May, right? This is Theresa May who disappeared. She kept her mouth shut all the way through the referendum, remained relatively neutral, and then managed to land herself in a job that she ostensibly didn't want without a vote being cast in her name by the public.
She wanted the job, mate.
Exactly. She knows about subtlety. She knows about positioning. She's not going to then allow somebody to walk out of Downing Street.
She's not going to be checking. Right, number one, that she didn't. This person walked out of number 9 into number 10. Theresa May would not have been necessarily... Well, you're suggesting the Prime Minister's checking bags at the door of number 9 Downing Street.
Possibly not personally.
Well, no one is.
She does like bags.
She does like bags, but now you're being silly again.
Sorry about that.
That's quite all right. There's plenty of room for it at the time. Do you think there is a plan?
I would think so. Yeah, I think that is some sort of negotiating position that's been put out deliberately by accident, and is probably a little bit fake and a little bit over the top. But it's, again,
what does it achieve then, Dan? What does it achieve?
I think it achieves what you might call non-linear warfare in the political arena. It stops the other 26 nations knowing really what we're doing. It's the sort of thing that people like...
That is what I would say if I was defending myself in this situation. If you said, you haven't got a plan, have you? I would say, I have a brilliant plan. Do you know what I have, Dan? I have a cunning plan. I have a cunning plan, but I can't tell you what it is yet because things and issues and others. Go on, give me a clue. What's in your plan? How cunning is your plan? It's so cunning. This is the politics of Donald Trump. I got a plan. I can't tell you what the plan is. It's the best plan. We're going to win bigly. We got a great plan. We're going to I shall do such things that they shall be the terrors of the earth, Dan. What they are, yet I know not. But they shall be the terrors. You can tell I saw King Lear last week, can't you? And that's the thing. What's the plan? Where's the plan, Dan? Dan, what's the plan, Dan?
Well, I think of May as an upside-down swan. She's all flappy legs on the surface, and underneath she's as smooth as silk. That's what I think about.
Okay. I'll have 2 of what he's on. 29 minutes after 10 is the time. Looking for things that are loosely something we can all agree on. Now, at the very beginning of this process, the thing that we could all agree on was this. Nobody knows what happens next. Months down the line, if we can all still agree on that, it's terrifying. Surely, you've got to think somebody knows what's going to happen next. Who would your hero be? Who's the person that you think does have a proper plan, given that most people recognise that the referendum was conducted in a sort of parallel universe where facts in the traditional sense were thin on the ground? And if there's no plan, why wouldn't you be worried that there's no plan? Why is it the people that didn't want to be here are worried about how much of a mess it is, whereas the people who chose to be here are literally just insisting that everyone stops talking about it now? Look, we've done it, okay? Just stop talking about it. It's 10:30. What is the plan? What is the plan? I can't quite join you in believing that it's been deliberately done, this full page of notes, scrawled, often incoherent, somewhat lacking in consistency or meaning. I can't quite believe that it was deliberately exposed to the potential camera glares outside Downing Street. A government spokesman has already sought to minimise the significance of this page of notes. These individual notes, the spokesman said, do not belong to a government official or a special advisor. They do, however, belong to someone who was at the meeting, the Chief of Staff of Mark Field, but the spokesman goes on, they do not reflect the government's position in relation to Brexit negotiations, which theoretically is a relief. Have cake and eat it being the starting point of those negotiations. And I sort of have to work out who we're making radio for at the moment today. And I guess the people that we're making radio for are people who are interested in the future of the country. That's the only way I can describe it. If you're not, if you're happy just to sort of sit back now and wait to see what happens, that's fine. But, you know, this is a news-based radio station where we discuss the key issues of the moment, and there is no bigger issue facing our nation than the terms of our Brexit deal. So if you don't like the fact that I continue talking about it, because perhaps it makes you feel a bit silly, given that you wanted to be here but you had no idea what here would look like, that's absolutely fine. But I'm not going to change my commitment to examining the future of my country because you're frightened that you might have actually punched yourself and everybody else in Britain in the face. So that just doesn't wash, I'm afraid. That's not how democracies function, and it's certainly not how freedom of the press functions. We've done something. We've made a decision collectively as a country. Not to wonder where that decision might lead us is like pulling the ripcord on your parachute without knowing whether or not the parachute bag contains a silken parachute or a packet of Haribo sweets. That's what you're doing. Don't talk about it. Don't look in the bag. Just pull the ripcord. Stop looking in the bag, you pesky Ramonas. Get over it. Why on earth are you checking what might be in the parachute bag? We've pulled the ripcord. Jump! Okay, Michael's in Sutton. Michael, what's going on?
Well, we don't have any plan, and I
don't know that, Michael. You don't know
I think
that.
The problem is that I don't think either side in the referendum thought that the Brexit vote would win, because Cameron and Osborne were so committed to the fact that they'd win by scaring everyone about leaving that they've clearly admitted they had no plan in place as Prime Minister.
Well, they kind of did. I mean, he said, and this is where the confusion even arguably gets even worse, because I'm checking on this and I'm looking for a consensus. It seems to me pretty clear that most of the economic predictions of doom and gloom that we're being told haven't come true, therefore they were all wrong. They were contingent on Cameron keeping his word and triggering Article 50 the day after the referendum result was delivered.
True, but he bottled that and quit and left it to someone else. But you've also got people, who are Gove and Boyce, who's obviously now in the government, who basically just said what they wanted to, 350 million a week for the NHS and stuff, and I don't think they had a real clue what would happen. I don't think they actually honestly thought they would win. I think Boris is vacillating between the two.
I'm not giving you any prizes for this observation. I think this is probably one of the things that most of us can agree on. Not all of us, but most of us can agree on the fact that some of the most prominent and effective Leave campaigners were doing it for personal pragmatic reasons rather than a deep belief that this victory could A, be achieved, or B, in Boris's case, was even desirable.
Yeah, but Cameron and Osborne should have had, as government at the time, should have prepared for any eventuality. That's surely what you expect a government to do. Have things ready as contingencies, and they didn't.
I'd hold no candle for Cameron or Osborne, but I don't know that it was their job to have a plan in place to do this, because it would have been a rejection. I mean, to be really Anaraki about politics, it's a rejection of the manifesto that they fought the election on. I mean, they fought an election, they won an election on a manifesto that pledged to remain in the single market. It also pledged to give a a vote on European Union membership, but they pledged to remain in the single market. And as soon as the result was in, they must have realised that they couldn't. And at that point...
They gave a vote, and they should have had something ready or people working on something for either way. It's a very simple binary vote.
I disagree with you. I disagree with you.
They should have had civil servants working.
Well, possibly.
A team. They should have appointed a team. You work on any eventuality. I lead a team, I manage a team, not that high up. I get people working on different outcomes if I need to, depending on what might happen in the future. I try and be prepared. You need to do that as a leader. It doesn't need to be them, but someone beneath them.
How do you know? I mean, how many months since June now? Further down the line, they've had teams in place ever since. And you still don't think there's anything that remotely resembles a plan in place?
No, I don't think there is anything that remotely resembles a plan in place. I don't believe Theresa May or Philip Hammond. I think what you said before, they've got great plans, bigly plans, is a fair point. They're just,
the best plans. We've got the best plans.
Exactly. But, beforehand, their predecessors should have had a couple of task forces. Don't need MPs.
Okay. No, okay. I'm not going to buy the T-shirt yet. But you've made a more powerful argument than I've managed as to why they should actually, even though they expected to lose. I beg your pardon. They didn't expect to lose and didn't want to lose. They should have had little more in place to deal with the scenario of losing, and that presumably explains why he resigned so quickly, although I think you'd have resigned as well. 52% of the country has effectively called you a liar. This wasn't just a clash of opinion. This was David Cameron and the, quotes, political class, end quotes, being described as charlatans, liars, shysters, con artists, tricksters. If 52% of the voters described you like that, I think you'd probably have walked away, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would. I think he'd have quit either way, honestly, because I don't think he'd have lost most of his backbench if he'd have won. He'd have been forced out if he'd won.
Who's benefited so far, apart from, I suppose, Boris Johnson ending up as Foreign Secretary, Mr Farage ending up as an economic migrant and foreign elite? Who, apart from them, who's benefited most so far?
I can't see anyone, honestly.
Yeah, but I go fingers crossed.
I'm really not sure.
Here's the thing, all right? Here's what we'll agree to do, you and me, okay? We will cross our fingers, we will hope, and we will move towards a brave new dawn, but we won't stop looking in the rearview mirror, and we won't stop asking where the map is.
Absolutely.
All right, you're on. And there's the deal. I just want to see the map. That's all. I'm on the bus. I'm coming with you. Lots of people are telling me we're going towards the cliff edge. I'm ignoring them. You get in the back of the bus. Get in the back of the van! Okay? I just want to see the map now, so that I can have a fair idea of where the bus is going. Otherwise, you've just got on a bus with no number on the front. And you voted for it. What do you want to do? I want to get on that bus over there. What number is it? Dunno. What colour is it? Oh, great colour. It's bright blue. I'm getting on it. And it's got 350 million quid written on the side. Do I get that if I get on the bus? Yeah, you do. We'll spend it all on the NHL. Well, I'm on that bus. Where are we going? Oh. Who'd get on a bus without knowing where it was going? Oh, you can't tell the passengers where the bus is going because we're negotiating with all the other bus companies and they might try and steal the same route. It's the level of arrogance that's involved now that is unbelievable. Why can't we know? Why can't we just have an inkling of what Theresa May wants so that we can judge her against whether or not she's achieved it? And David Cameron tootled off to Brussels to get us that deal that was supposed to save the union. Everyone was... No one said to him, you can't turn up with... You can't go with plans. You've got to go with your cards close to your chest. You've got to go with a have cake in it. No one said that to David. So how come now everybody's turning around and saying, we don't need to see the map. We don't need to know the plan. We don't need to see the map. We're on the bus. Let's just enjoy the journey. Christopher, help me enjoy the journey.
Well, I'm thinking that your reference to Cameron's negotiations were an object lesson in just how not to do it, because he got absolutely nothing out of it. Because he went there, and what he wanted was very clear from the very beginning, and that is not the way you do it.
What did he want?
A serious negotiator will start from a position of wanting their cake and eating it.
This is my 8-year-old wanting to go to bed at midnight.
That is a start position of a negotiation.
Yes.
If you've ever been in a negotiation with people, and look at what the unions used to do, that's the starting point. Now, the first...
So what are they asking for, then?
Well, they're asking for access to the single market, to remain inside the customs union but not affected by it. They're asking for the impossible, but that's where you start from. Which is an intelligent
analysis, Christopher. I would, however, ask you to address all of the Leave campaigners who have spent most of this year saying that that's not an impossible dream.
Oh, well, if you're the negotiator, you know it probably.
I'm not talking about that now. I'm talking about all of the politicians who you can name who've spent all of 2016 telling us that having your cake and eating it is not impossible. So, what do you say to them?
Well, I would say to them that they know that they are going to have to make some concessions, but the first person in a negotiation who says, look, be reasonable, is on the losing side.
No, I understand the point you've made, and it's a powerful point, and obviously you go in asking for the moon, not expecting to get the moon, but my concern is all of the people, many of whom are now quite angry, often with the wrong people, but that's the nature of anger, all of the people who believed it was possible to have your cake and eat it. Where have they been left?
They've been left disappointed. However...
But they voted to have their cake and eat it because they were told that it was possible.
Oh, well, they should grow up a bit, don't be so naive. The point I really wanted to make was I thought that this leaking of this document being seen as she walked from number 9 to number 10 yesterday was a masterstroke, because I think it was probably done on purpose.
Oh, come on.
No, I mean...
Really?
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying that to me.
You want your opponents in a negotiation to know where you're going to start from. And that was a very clear message to the EU that we are starting, or the negotiation team are starting from an intractable position, really, and they're going to. That's what they're going to be asking for to begin with.
And when the spokespeople and Whitehall sources queue up to say that this does not reflect what David Davis, who runs the department, has been saying recently, this is not. I mean, quoting a minister is more likely to have been one of the Eurosceptic juniors like David Jones. You respond to me because you've got all the cards in this game by saying, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? Ha 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 ha.
Most probably. It's been good to speak with you. Thanks very much.
Likewise, Christopher. Thank you to you. I didn't mention where you were ringing from. Englefield Green. 10:45 is the time. The notion that you don't tell the British people what Britain is going to look like after Article 50 is triggered and Brexit is complete, because if you do, then our former partners in the European Union will know what our priorities and plans are, is a popular position. I'm not persuaded by it at the moment for a couple of reasons, not least, as Mr. Singh points out on Twitter, that the reason why Cameron didn't get much concession out of them during his infamous negotiation was because I don't think he made the EU aware of how likely a leave vote was. That's why they didn't concede much. And then we left. The leave vote is now a fait accompli. So the negotiation surely is one that you conduct in the interests of both parties. What you're saying to the people you're negotiating with is, look, we want to minimise the damage to you. Everybody knows. Oh, I keep saying everybody. I think that's one thing the only thing we can agree on is nobody knows anything about what happens next, not for sure. But most people would accept, I think, that the European Union is going to suffer from Britain's departure as well as Britain suffering. No, you're not going to accept that. You're not going to accept that Britain's suffering. Let's leave Britain out of it then. The European Union is worse off without Britain. Yeah? Can we all agree on that? Whatever you think the future of the European Union is going to be, can we all agree on that? I got any phone lines free for people to disagree? I got one, if you want to disagree. So the European Union will suffer from Britain's departure. It will be worse off. I kind of think that goes hand in hand with the acceptance that Britain will be as well, but for the purposes of today's discussion, I'm happy to park that presumption. The EU will be worse. So you go into your negotiation saying, let's try and make the negative impact on you lot as little as possible. And in return for making the negative impact on you lot as little as possible, here's some stuff that we'd quite like. But you wouldn't go in there with chapter and verse on a laminated sheet and hand it out at the door. You would, however, want to have at least a vague idea of what the map looks like before getting on the bus. And that's where the enemies of democracy now are on the march in this country. People who actually don't want to talk about where the country is going. I love this country. I hadn't realised how much I loved it until it changed, actually. I hadn't realised how wonderful it was to be raising my children in Britain until a lot of the things that made it wonderful got taken away or seemed poised to be taken away. I hadn't really registered the fact that my kids can go and work for their godfather in Spain if they want. They can go and live with him and work in his shop and in their year off and learn another language and do all of these things and can move freely and travel. I hadn't really registered about how important it was to have sort of things like scientific research leading the world in some corners, Nobel Prize winners. I hadn't really registered all of this. I really hadn't. I'd like everybody else, I'd fallen into thinking that the debate was about Romanian car washers and council houses. My God, I love this place. Why is it in any way controversial to want to hang on to as much that makes it wonderful as possible and wave goodbye to as little as possible? And why do I have a Prime Minister conducting negotiations in the dark? The only answer is, well, there are two answers to this, right? Either she's got a brilliant plan and she isn't telling it to us because that would be self-defeating, or she hasn't got a plan at all. And we're moving towards one. 10:52 is the time. I suppose you take your pick, don't you? Jeff's in Bury. Jeff, what would you like to say?
Hi there. Great conversation this morning, but it all seems to be a bit one-sided.
Well, that's why you're here, Jeff.
Well, the business that we can't leave the EU, the free movement of people, I can't see why this comes into it. We get corned beef from Brazil. We don't have the free movement of Brazilians. I was in a closed...
No, but we don't have the free movement of corned beef either, Jeff. There'll be tariffs in place. That's the trade-off.
Well, the corned beef is pretty cheap, tariffs or not. If you take,
okay, well then let's talk about cars then instead of corned beef to make the point a little bit more powerful.
No, let's take clothing shop. All the clothes I saw yesterday were from Bangladesh, other places, non-EU. They were dirt cheap in Primark. The thing is, it's a bit of a nonsensical position that the Ramonas are calling from.
Because of corned beef?
That's just an example.
Or clothes. I was talking
to a guy yesterday who's just got some machinery, engineering machinery, from the United States. We don't have the free movement of people from the United States either. There's no, but if trade going on at the moment.
Yes, I mean, you put me in a slightly difficult position because you're operating from a fundamental misconception about what free movement means. It's in the Treaty of Rome, it's a three-pronged policy. You look for the free movement of capital, the free movement of services, and the free movement of capital will include the free movement of goods and the free movement of people. You can't have one without the other. So all of the things you cite, whether it's your friend buying engineering equipment from America or whether it's you buying your undercrackers from Primark yesterday, they might be affordable, but they're more expensive than they would be if there was a trade agreement in place. Well, such as the European Union enjoys as the strongest single market on the planet. And we've just opted out of it.
It's all been a stitch up since we joined the EU.
Now, that's a valid opinion, Jeff, but it's got absolutely nothing to do with what you rang in to say. Because what you rang in to say was, I just bought some cheap corned beef, so we don't need free movement of people. And the point is, if you're going to pay a 10, 15, 20% tariff on your car, you're probably going to feel a little less relaxed about the cheapness of corned beef. And even if you get away with not paying that tariff on your new Nissan, the government will be using your taxes to reimburse Nissan with that money, because outside of the European Union, we don't enjoy the free trade or the free movement of people or the free movement of capital. And that's why it's very hard to see what a good plan could look like, except the Nissan model, where they use our money that they said they were going to give to the NHS, and they give it to a company that's part-owned by the French government, Jeff.
Well, there's quite a few German states that are quivering over the automotive vehicles they send over here, and they want tariff-free.
Yes, but they won't get it, Jeff, because the European Union's very survival depends upon the people that leave, i.e. us, not coming away with a deal that looks attractive from the perspective of the people who stay. And we're not going to fall out, but I know exactly where you're getting the message that none of these German companies will allow tariffs to be put in place. The German president or chancellor has said that they will have to take some sort of economic hit in order to protect the European Union. It doesn't matter what the head of BMW says, mate. Listen to the Chancellor of Germany. She makes the policies, not the head of BMW or Nissan or Mercedes-Benz.
The problem is, all the soundings coming out of Britain now to the continent make us sound disorganised, weak. You wouldn't think this is a country. You may say I'm sounding jingoistic here, but you wouldn't think a country that had one of the biggest empires in the world not long ago can't organise themselves.
Well, you would have to look at how that empire failed, I suppose, and how it unravelled to conclude what you can learn about modern British politics from 100 plus years ago. And the reason why this country looks, as we can both agree, as if it doesn't have a Scooby-Doo what it's doing, is because it doesn't, my friend.
Well,
but good luck to all of us.
I think Angela Merkel will try and get the rest of the 27 group, or 28, to adapt the free movement of people. I can see that coming.
Well, unfortunately, another flaw in that referendum debate was that the notion of being able to adapt it in a way that you could only move to a country where you had a job offer in place was doable. But we won't be in that partnership anymore.
I think, unfortunately, this flawed referendum, as you know, if you voted in or out, we know it was advisory, but there was nothing at all on that slip that said it was advisory. It said, we will...
On the bill that Parliament passed, there was. So, I mean...
No, I'm talking about the slip we took to the ballot box. It said, do you want the EU to remain or to leave? Now, Cameron, quite clearly, didn't think he'd get the result he was getting. That's why he
Indeed.
He placed it this way. And that's why it went so quick, obviously.
I have to point out to you before you go that corned beef has gone up quite a lot in the last year. It's even dearer sliced per kilo. It's about £2 a tin, and if it's measured in dollars, as given most of it comes out of Argentina, it will have gone up in real terms by between 15 and 20% already, and that is likely to climb further next year, mate. So if I were you, Jeff, I'd stock up.
See, we've got cheap corned beef coming from Europe.
We won't have cheap corned beef coming from Europe. I think every single tin of corned beef on the planet comes from the Fray Bentos plant in Argentina.
Exactly.
Which means the fact that we've lost 16% against the dollar makes every single tin of corned beef 16% more expensive than it was last year.
So the European farmers obviously aren't up to it. That's why we've got to get it from outside the EU.
No, the corned beef is what you make in South America for historical and climate-based reasons. We've never made corned beef in Europe. Although there's me thinking I'd handed you a wonderful little bit of evidence as to why perhaps the corned beef example was not as powerful as you thought, and there's you handing it back to me, which is fine, Jeff. But if you read, no, it's not a question of agreeing, mate. It's a question of counting. The price of corned beef will go up. You just count it. You don't agree or disagree. It's not a matter of opinion. If the company that sells it to us is operating in dollars, it will go up. And of course, even if they could make it in Europe and we could buy it from Europe, that would be under the terms of the free trade deal that we currently enjoy with our European partners. And you voted to get rid of that, Jeff. So wherever you're getting your corned beef from, whether it's from non-existent European farmers or from the actual Argentinian farmers that make it, you voted for it to be more expensive. Dear James, what's it like knowing everything? Well, not much fun, I've got to be honest with you. In fact, it's probably more depressing than it's ever been in the history of knowing everything. Imagine a little boy at the back of a crowd of grown-ups who's pointing out to all the grown-ups that the emperor hasn't got any clothes on, and all the grown-ups are telling him to shut up and go away. Okay, we voted for that new outfit and we love it. That's what it feels like knowing everything. But thanks for the concern. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. Speaking of knowing everything, we may perhaps have got a little distracted by corned beef in our conversation with Jeff a moment ago. He and I indeed mentioned German car manufacturers as well. So I have a timely quote from you from, well, you know, the president of the German Association of the Automotive Industry. Just some geezer. Yes, we certainly have influence, he said. But we are at least as interested in keeping the European Union together. In fact, that is our priority. He added that Britons are deluded if they think that German car makers care only about selling 5 more cars rather than taking a long-term view. And that speaks to, my thanks to Incorrigible FCA for bringing that to my attention, that speaks to all the people on the Leave side who came out with lines like the one Jeff just repeated. Very simply say, oh, there's no way the Germans import loads of cars into this country. There's no way they're going to go along with that. So who do you go to? Who do you go to for a view on what the German car industry is going to do? Do you go to Boris Johnson? Do you go to Nigel Farage? Or do you go to the president of the German Automotive Industry Association? It's your choice. It's all out there. All this information is out there. Why do you keep talking about it, James? Because I'm on the bus and I want to see the map. Question this morning. Is there a map? 0345 60 60973 is the number that you need. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. Sean is in Tunbridge Wells. Are you disgusted?
I've got a remedy for everybody because everybody's getting distressed over this. We're all in different camps, aren't we? More or less 50-50. And I've got a solution to please everybody.
There we go.
Exclusive. I've been thinking about this, and it's the European Union, to me, is not a functioning union. It's going to implode slowly in other nations. Look at the Italian banks now. There's something going on within the union. How about changing the European Union to a European Commonwealth, where sovereign states stay sovereign, but trade within a Commonwealth of nations who have to be parliamentary democracies, which the European Union has done? The 28 nations stay within the Commonwealth. No tariff zone. Movement of people is done under a visa. So you want to work from Poland to England, you get employed via Poland, you do the paperwork, you come in on a visa situation. So you can move around like a normal working visa. Surely the Brexiteers would like that because sovereign Poland stays sovereign. You have a Commonwealth summit every 3 months, rotating around the Commonwealth, talking about issues, so we stay together as a Commonwealth. We don't implode. It stops the domination of Germany in Europe if we pull out, by the way. You've got the Eurozone, de facto Fourth Reich, which is frightening. It's a very dominant area.
I was nodding along until you... This language is so... The Fourth Reich.
Well, it's what I read about. It's almost like it's a control they have economically rather than militarily. The Eurozone is basically a German-controlled area.
Because if we wanted, they're the biggest investors. They have the biggest financial investment in the Eurozone, so they exercise arguably more power than the smaller investors do. But
that's the wrong word to use,
But their priority is the security and the prosperity of the whole union. See, and when you use phrases like Fourth Reich, and I'm not having a pop at you.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I'm just trying to think of a word for it.
Well, you could just describe it as a political union in which some partners have more power than others. And part of the way in which you accrue power, Sean, is by playing a part properly in the parliamentary processes, which we've chosen as a country not to do for 20 years.
Right.
We've been electing jokes and charlatans to the European Parliament and then wondering why we don't have as much influence as we'd quite like to have.
Let me develop this argument then. Can I ask you one simple question? Who's your Euro MP in your home constituency?
Don't know.
There you go. And that's the issue.
Of course it is. Of course that's the issue. That's my point about not having taken it seriously for years. I'm Joni Mitchell, mate, in this debate. I'm Joni Mitchell. I don't know what I've got till it's gone.
Well, let me keep going on my area to open up the debate.
Yes.
So the European Commonwealth, would everybody stay sovereign? We talk about because I like to see Europe stay together. I don't like the fact it's something not unreal, surreal about pulling away from Europe by being independent. I'm not comfortable with it. But it would accrue a lot more trade if we stay together as a Commonwealth. The only area of what you'd have paperwork for or for an institution would be a European a monetary fund. A European monetary fund to bring up the nation.
But then you've sacrificed some sovereignty.
You'd have to sacrifice a little bit just to keep
but the whole plan is based upon restoring sovereignty. Your whole plan, and the first thing you've said in your roadmap of how we're going to do things differently, we'd have to surrender a bit of sovereignty on economics, man. On economics.
Because the nearest trading zone we've got is Europe. Why not have strong trading partners within the Commonwealth and let people retain their talent within these parliaments? Some of these parliaments are fairly new, in the Baltics and the Balkans are very, very new. Let them grow and develop and grow strong.
But that's what happens under the European Union umbrella. You're supposed to enhance democracy. You're supposed to encourage parliaments in these countries. We can't do that by leaving.
We can, as a Commonwealth, we stay together as a unified Commonwealth. We rotate as a European Commonwealth like we do in the other Commonwealth.
All right.
No, it's worth thinking
the Queen is the head of the Commonwealth, right? So again, this was probably we need a slightly better word because I don't think that many European Union countries, except possibly Germany, are going to be comfortable subjugating themselves to the Queen.
Would you bear this area in mind, though, of something different?
Well, I'm not. I'm listening to you, Sean. My job is to pick holes in what you're saying, and I mean, it's still more T-shirt than whole. So we've surrendered economic sovereignty, and we've put the Queen in charge of France.
No, we all stay sovereign. Sovereign parliaments stay sovereign. It's just a trading Commonwealth.
Well, then you can't have a monetary fund or a bank.
Well, we retain our independent currencies. What was wrong with trading before under
lots of countries voted to surrender their independent currencies using their sovereignty. John's in Putney. John, what would you like to say?
Well, I was really without covering something you've just touched on, which is that any form of agreement and hence any treaty involves some degree of loss of sovereignty, then I think this is something a lot of people seem unable to get their heads around. Yes. But anyway, the point I was really going to go back to was the whole idea of this secret mystery plan.
What's that Leonard Cohen song? What's the Leonard Cohen song? Is it a secret chord? There's a secret chord.
Yes, secret chord.
That's what we're looking for. We're looking for the secret chord today.
I think it's either the secret chord or it's if you go back to a very, very, very old television quiz program where you had a mystery box.
You're older than me.
A prize. I know. Well, I saw it. Actually, I saw it as a kid anyway. But anyway, the point is, there often wasn't much in it. And this is a classic ploy. The truth is, the secret plan is secret because the government are really running scared of the fact that any agreement they have to make will involve watering down the Leave message.
Yes.
So they've got
or committing an act of, even more epic self-harm than we're currently poised to commit.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, they've got the 48% Remain is in the bag anyway, because whatever we get, something we can cling to is good. But the problem they've got is they've got a Leave side who basically want a kind of iconoclastic, smash it all.
No, not all of them. This is really the binary nature of the debate has been so damaging. Is it?
All right, no, that's fair. That's fair. I take that point. But a substantial constituency of them who basically want out at pretty much any price.
Yes.
They're going to offend them more.
And they're the noisiest.
When they exactly. They're going to offend them mortally when they had to reveal at some point in the negotiation proceedings with their secret plan and their secret roadmap and all this sort of mystery. I'm always reminded of the blank map in The Hunting of the Snark. The famous phrase where, they had a blank sheet representing the land without of sea without the least vestiges of land. So it was, it's completely mad. But anyway, the point is they've got a blank sheet of paper. They don't know where they're going. But the problem is that any admission of any kind of concession would get the more red blood slathering Leavers out like a complete bunch of
and that is
rioters.
Where one can muster some sympathy for Theresa May, despite the
absolutely.
not covering herself in glory prior to becoming Prime Minister with regard to the European Union. She can't really show any. I don't want to employ she can't show anything. She can't. Because she hasn't got anything, but B, because anything that she does suddenly decide should be a policy, it's not a question of giving it away to our negotiating opposite numbers in Europe. It's a question of getting shot in the back by her own side, isn't it? You're right, John. You got it. You got it, mate.
I think everywhere you look is a downside, as you explained to the guy about the corned beef.
Yeah,
your negotiating position is always a downside because the Leave option doesn't have any good sides. It's very difficult.
And whenever she says, and whenever people shout about, you don't understand negotiation, we can't possibly reveal what we're going to do or what we're seeking because the other side would then know, the reason why that just seems counterintuitive in many ways is because it's not true. The real reason why she can't say anything publicly about what they're aiming for or what they're hoping for is because all the people who've spent the last 30 or 40 years subverting parliamentary democracy will be sticking their knives into her back.
Yeah, exactly. So she's got to play for time, keep her fingers crossed, and hope that something, to quote, was it Mr. McCall or whatever, something sort of comes up.
Something will come up. It was indeed Mr. McCall, but she's hoping something will come up, and of course Boris Johnson, sitting in the Foreign Office, hoping that it doesn't.
Yeah, that's all they can do. Cross their fingers and hope that nobody ever finds out that the box is empty.
Right, take your pick, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There you go. Right, well, I'm staying with this for a little longer because I want you to come and shoot down John's theory now. I want you to come and shoot down John's reasoning on this, which is powerful, okay? Looking for things that we can all agree on. Why won't they tell us, why won't they let us look at the map? Because the minute she shows the map to the British people, she gets stabbed in the back. Yeah, I buy. That's a much more powerful explanation, to my mind, than the idea that she won't show us the map in case all the other people see the map. It's not that, is it? It's self-interest. Everything she's done this year has been very, very, very good for Theresa May. And at the moment, what's good for Theresa May is not necessarily what's good for Britain. 0345 60609. Well, I give you the number. I haven't got any phone lines free. And some people want me to stop talking about it. It's 11:15. And why can't we see the map that will show us at least possible routes out of the European Union? Answer, because the minute that Theresa May gives away a single coordinate on that map, the knives will be out again from her own back benches and possibly from some members of the front bench. That, for me, constitutes progress today. The alternative, of course, is that there is a plan and she's keeping it secret. I don't think she's got a plan. I think she's just waiting to see what she can get away with or the path that she can plot that will enable her to stay Prime Minister and avoid... Well, I don't know why she'd want to avoid a general election given the the landscape at the moment. That is truly baffling. We may spend a bit of time examining that question as well. But I keep thinking I should start finding good news every morning as well for you. And there is some good news around today. In fact, there's a brilliant story around today that I feel, because it's... Yeah, all right, I'll say it. It's speak your weight rather than ghost train. But it is actually to do with terrorism and terror threats. So if I... And this is why I would never be a very good sort of populist journalist. I'm happy being popular. Populist has never been my style, because I don't want to frighten you for no reason, even if it does put bums on seats, even if it does, get me clicks or credits or whatever the correct phraseology. I don't want to scare you for no reason or unnecessarily. It's a brilliant story around today featuring the so-called man in the hat terrorist who was featured at that French airport. And do you know what he said? And he's just one bloke, he's just one headbanger, he's not necessarily speaking for the whole of Daesh or anything like that. But the quality of our services, security services in this country, is so high, and their ability to sniff out potential miscreants and terrorists is so good that we're not on a watch list on anything like the level that other countries are. It's not an unalloyed good. Ideally, there'd be no list of potential targets. But the reason he suggests why France has suffered so much more than other European Union countries from terrorist attack in recent years is because of the terrorists' perception of the security coverage that we enjoy. So yet another reason to love Britain, yet another reason to be proud to live here, yet another reason to hope that our security cooperation with the European Union remains exactly as it is now after we leave. Reasons to believe that it will, of course. 22 minutes after 11. Gordon is in Bristol. Gordon, what's the plan?
Well, I was ringing to illustrate a problem, but I guess I should turn it around, really.
No, you do whatever you want, Gordon. You do whatever you want.
Well, I can present it as a positive. I mean, I was ringing up because I have a specific example of a more general challenge that Brexit is going to present that doesn't get as much attention, and that's that the free movement of people is only one aspect, and the customs union is really, really important.
Yes.
I'm very biased. My PhD involved doing a lot of workouts in Holland. I've spent most of my career working with Germans and Americans, and I've seen the difference between needing stuff or not. But the example is the Germans that I'm working with at the moment were exhibiting in Switzerland last Friday, Saturday. That's not the EU, but it is the EEA. So free movement of people is no problem. I jumped on a plane, went straight out there.
Yeah.
But free movement of goods isn't.
Really?
Needs a carnet if you are just... if you are taking stuff into the country to exhibit, and this is a couple £100,000 worth of medical imaging equipment, about a day's worth of work to get all the paperwork together, and then when they got to the border, there was a mistake in one of the pieces of paper. It eventually delayed them about 5 or 6 hours. They had to drive around to another border post on the other side of Lake Geneva where they were able to deal with the issue. I'm not clear if they dealt with it officially or whether that post was just more flexible, but they eventually got in well after midnight, and then on late night Sunday it took them about half an hour to get the paperwork stamped as they went back out again. Now, if you're being positive, you can prove that that's fine. You don't have to have free movements of goods as well, because they did the paperwork and they got around it. But, it wasted 15 or 20 hours of time, where if that been in the EU, they'd have just driven over, got on with it and come back again. And, this is a real challenge. And it's not just that sort of thing. At the moment, we have the customs regulation, which means all the regulations are unified. So you have a device that is acceptable in the UK, you can sell it all over Europe. You already have done.
In the strictest sense of the term, and it's a confusing term for a lot of people, myself included, I don't want to sound condescending, but in the strictest sense of the term, doesn't that involve a surrender of some sovereignty? If you're going to have rules that apply equally right across a territory which you're not in charge of, then you've surrendered some of your sovereignty.
You of course you have, but everything we do is cost benefit. You surrender your personal sovereignty by having to be present at LBC between 10 and 1 every day because you're presenting your radio show.
Well, it's back to the social contract. It's back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, isn't it? You're born free, but is everywhere in chains. We choose the chains.
Yeah, but and we're busy demonstrating with Brexit that actually the chains are voluntary. We can choose to take the chains off and go and do whatever we want. but we lose the freedom to sell our goods under one regulation. Or, more interestingly, actually, when we have this grand act that puts all of EU into UK law so we can break free, what then? What happens when the EU change any law? Do we just blindly follow? Or do we just accept that now we've got two fantastically complicated different rule books to go by? Because if we just blindly follow, we're just as tied as we were before, and now we have no input into the system whatsoever. And if we don't, well, everybody has been moaning that EU law is far too complicated. I know there's a lot of people I've debated with locally that don't see the problem, but for any company that's dealing internationally, you may now suddenly have two fantastically complicated sets of regulations which may or may not clash that you now need to try and adhere to. So you have your sovereignty, but actually...
Well, you're full of the joys. You're full of the joys of Christmas, aren't you?
Sorry, I work internationally, so it hasn't actually affected me yet, but it could do. The guys I'm working for that have medical imaging equipment, their prices have already had to go up 20% in the UK, which is affecting things. So, you know,
and that's affecting NHS budgets. That could affect the tax take. That's going to affect budget forecasts, and that's just a matter of fact, is it? Medical imaging equipment's gone up by 20% since June.
No, it's a matter of exchange rate.
No, I know it's fact, but historical fact. It's not. You're not speculating or pontificating. You're just counting.
Yeah, it's literally, if they carry on with the same margin in Germany, then the price here has got, what is it?
And this is why the country's had enough of experts. This is why, because I don't want to listen to you anymore. I just want someone to tell me everything's going to be great. I don't know how long it's going to take, but trust me, it'll all be fine.
Yeah, well, if it makes you feel better, I did make the mistake of quoting them in pounds, so they're very happy employing me, so I've got cheaper. I do feel like a Mr. Shrimp there, but, you know.
so they're saving money on every single deal they do at the time. But again, you can see why it is very, very tempting to think, shut up, Gordon, we've had enough of experts. Tell me everything's going to be great, and roughly when. Without much evidence or expertise, but with lots and lots of hope and optimism, and I'll buy that as well now. Mark is in Hebden Bridge. Mark, what would you like to say?
It's going to be fine.
When?
Well, it will obviously take a long time. The European Union has been deeply ingrained into our legislation.
You're not joining in on my joke now, are you? You're doing exactly what I just said would be funny.
I believe it. Yeah. I think it's going to be fine. In fact, I think
even when you heard Gordon, when you heard people doing business with Europe.
There are swings and roundabouts.
The head of the German automotive industry.
Those are exporters as well, who are exporting perhaps into the EU, but also into countries which pay in dollars, not just the USA.
Right. And the head of the German Automotive Association?
And there were lots of people arguing for a devaluation. In fact, before the last general election, never mind before
no one in the referendum campaign says we need to devalue the pound. Vote leave, mate. Sorry, you can't have that.
Nevertheless, I think it's going to be good for us in the long term.
So that was evidence. Well, optimism.
The fact that apart from the devaluation, actually economically things are not going too badly.
We haven't left. We haven't triggered Article 50.
Yes, and I think that you're unlikely to get the plan that you're asking for.
So apart from the pound in our pocket being worth exponentially less than it was before the vote, everything's going well.
I think everything is going tolerably, and I think that there's...
Tolerably? I think has to go better than it did before. Better is what we were sold. Better.
Yes, and I think that as long as we carry on with this sort of quite negative line, I think the next general election will be grim for those people who did argue for Remain in the referendum itself. I think if there is a general election,
but you see what you've just done.
You
see what you've just done. Carry on.
Labour is going likely to get very badly hurt.
No, Labour is in all sorts of trouble. But I tell you now, whether it comes as a surprise to you or not, Jeremy Corbyn doesn't want to stay in the European Union. That's Labour's big problem. It's not that he's the leader of some sort of backlash, Remain backlash. He envisions he wants to come out of the European Union so that they can do away with all rules regarding state intervention in industry and start spending it all on whatever the latter-day equivalent of Longbridge will be. But let me just run you through what you've just done.
Would it surprise you to know that in my district, in northern England, probably most Labour voters agree with Jeremy Corbyn? They don't agree with the Parliamentary Labour Party.
It doesn't surprise me at all. But then I do what I always do and ask them a couple of questions. And then things get very messy very quickly.
I just suggest
bit like I did with you.
Labour are going to be trying to argue something that their own voters in their heartland are not going to want to accept.
Again, you see, this is where I have to intervene with pesky facts. Labour have already said that they're not going to argue against the triggering of Article 50.
For as long as this carries on being about the plan, they will still look negative, and therefore they're likely.
Labour haven't done anything. Labour haven't done anything. I mean, you can lump commentators if you want into the category that you describe, but you can't put Jeremy Corbyn in it. John McDonnell has come out and green-lighted everything Theresa May wants to do without knowing what it is. There's no Labour Conservative battle here because there's no meaningful Labour presence on the political landscape at the moment. But just to clarify,
you've got a majority of the Parliamentary Labour Party arguing for the position of essentially Tony Blair, who's now re-entering British politics, that they would like in principle to be able to agree the plan, which is the topic of your conversation.
No, I haven't heard any Labour MP say that.
They want to be able to have this discussed out on the floor of the Commons.
No, well, that's the law.
And possibly a second referendum.
That's the law. No, again, I haven't heard any Labour MPs call for that.
Okay.
But again, I mean, this is fine because the conversation ends. I've given you loads and loads of facts. You've given me loads and loads of opinions that aren't backed up by facts, and you end by saying, well, I still think everything's going to be great. So just say it, Mark, for the record.
Everything's going to be fine.
Thank you, mate. This is 11:31.